We are live, guys. Taylor Jacobson is with us. He's founder and CEO at Focusmate, a company that I signed up for. I think I saw you on Product Hunt, Taylor, and really loved the product because it's so simple. And like I told you pre-call, the best ideas, or my favorite ideas at least, they're super simple products, easy to launch. They fix a clear problem, and definitely we are having that problem, especially post-pandemic. Hi, Taylor. Please introduce yourself. Please tell us about Focusmate. You started that in 2016. Tell us about the why behind it and a bit more about yourself.
Yeah. What's up, everyone? And thanks for having me, Charles. Well, I'm going to start with the why. I started working remotely over 10 years ago. I actually begged my boss at the time to let me work remotely because our office was really far away. And long story short, I lost my job because I just could not get it together working from home alone. And yeah, went into a depression and shame spiral, really. I mean, I'd never got fired from a job. Guess the silver lining was that did start my entrepreneurial journey, but I spent really years and years trying to figure out how to not procrastinate. And I always been somebody that I knew I had a lot of potential. I had great ideas. I was really sharp, and just following through was super hard. And like the first business I tried on my own, I just felt like it was like watching paint dry, except I was the paint, I guess. And I just was moving at this glacial pace, and I couldn't really figure it out. And it felt like I just was watching my life and my potential just slip away. And then I actually found my way into coaching and workshops and just basically personal development, because I was trying to figure out really how to do self-improvement. And I was working with a client who, really high performer, was procrastinating on an investor presentation. And, part of my learning has been that actually a ton of really smart, really high performers procrastinate, have ADHD. And I had this fantasy basically that I'd never told anybody. But there was this guy in need. So I pitched him on this idea that I thought could help him, but I thought it could help me too. And this is basically what's turned into Focusmate. So what I pitched to him was, let's get on a video call and let's tell each other what we're going to do, what work we're going to accomplish on this video call. We're not going to talk about it. This is not a brainstorming call. We're literally going to sit there with each other, kind of like babysitting one another while we do work. So, fast forward, Focusmate is a platform. It's basically a social network where you can easily schedule a video call with another member. And the structure is, join the call, you meet your partner for about a minute or less. You're sharing what you're planning to do with the time, and your partner sharing what they're planning to do with the time as well. And then you get to work. And it could be 30 minutes, 60 minutes, or an hour and a half. And at the end, there's a bell. It reminds you to come back and you share how it went. Did you do what you said you wanted to do? How far did you, how much progress did you make? And I mean, I guess the key point in all this is it's just absurdly effective to help us get work done. It gets you, gets your butt in the seat because you have an appointment now. It forces you to be intentional about what you're going to work on, because you have to actually share it with another person. You can't just kind of slide unintentionally into whatever kind of seems has the most gravity for you at that point. You actually need to think about what you're going to do, so you make much better choices about what you're going to do with your time. And then the immediacy of knowing that in 30 minutes or in 60 minutes, you're going to tell that person if you did what you said you're going to do is really effective at just helping you stay on task. There's no like penalty. We can't punish people for this is not like a drill sergeant type of situation, but just human nature, human psychology. We're social animals, we're tribal animals. We want to be good tribe members. That's how our brains work. And so it's insane how strong the effect is of telling somebody what you're going to do and then knowing you're going to have to tell them if you did it. And that's kind of it. We have a few other features in terms of you can tell us preferences for who you want to work with. You can save your favorite partners and kind of build your own tribe within the platform of favorite coworkers. But yeah, long story short, it's just a way to supercharge your productivity.
Love it, dude. Background. I have used that method too inside my company. We used to call them workshops for writing cold outreach copy. Some people decided not to show up because it was daily. So I think the frequency has to do something with it, and just bad habits. Oh, today I don't want. And then the next day, oh, I don't want again. And then the habit of not showing up is forged. And through my mind went, okay, can I be with other CEOs doing that? I think that would be the best for me. And I would kind of incorporate it in my mastermind product, like show up with a bunch of CEOs and get shit done. And or potentially do workshops with them, copywriting workshops, whatever. Cool concept. I love the concept. Yeah, I'm sold, and I'll give it another try pretty soon. Focusmate. The question I had for you is, I heard you starting this call, you mentioned procrastination and ADHD. I do consider myself a functional ADHDer, and it's way more than functional. It's like a probably hyper-productive ADHD person, or I like to think myself that way at least. Is ADHD and procrastination synonyms, or do they go hand in hand most of the time?
That's a good question. I would say no, is the simple answer. ADHD, the way that I understand it and think about ADHD is it's maybe a combination of somebody who is more sensitive than average and possibly had what I would categorically describe as like childhood or developmental trauma that manifests itself as again, sort of categorically chronic nervous system dysregulation. And we just live in a society that has normalized that experience, and also in a society that is very overstimulating to the human organism. And so when you put together that kind of combination, what happens is you have somebody who's, and there's so many ADHD symptoms, right? So all of those different symptoms you could kind of say are different bodies expressing the same thing, which is being sensitive, having some degree of trauma, which it's like lowercase t trauma. Like we all have some trauma, expressing itself as distractibility. And distractibility, one way to think about it is like my environment is stimulating me in a way that is not supporting me to do the thing that I want to be doing. It doesn't mean the body is responding incorrectly. The body is actually responding as it was evolved to respond to something that feels dangerous, basically. So at a very high level, I would say ADHD is a sensitive organism responding to an environment that's telling it maybe it's not super safe. And so this is why I think a lot of people with ADHD are also very intelligent. It's this sensitivity that they are expressing they're responding more or reacting more to an environment that somebody else might not react to as much. It doesn't mean there's something wrong. And to me, it means also that somebody with ADHD just needs to be a lot more mindful of what their body needs, what resources they need to ground their nervous system, what structures they need to ensure that they are supported in order to actually channel all of that sensitivity into, the gift that it can be. And it seems like you've been pretty successful at doing that. I'd be interested to hear some of the things that you think have been like the 80-20s for you in becoming super productive, as you said. And procrastination, I would say, is just one of the symptoms. And like the key thing I think for people to understand is that the body, the nervous system, when it is in a state of sympathetic arousal, which is more commonly known as fight or flight or freeze, it's optimizing to run or to fight. The blood flow is in the spinal column and the extremities. It's not in the brain. And so you might be very active, and that's an experience a lot of procrastinators have, is they want to move. Unless you're in a freeze state, then you might be, in bed, which is another common experience for procrastinators. But it's basically, you're very agitated. You want to move, you want to do stuff, but there's no blood. The blood's not in your brain. You're trying to fight or run. So if we want to stop procrastinating, we need to be in a state of safety. And when we're in a state of safety, the blood flow goes to the brain, to the facial muscles, to the throat. We're now optimizing for communication and collaboration and creativity. But as I mentioned earlier, the way society is structured, a lot of us are chronically overstimulated, which means we're chronically in a state of stress that we might not realize because we're so used to it. But if we're in a chronic state of stress, that's basically saying we're either trying to fight or trying to run. We're not going to be able to focus and be creative and be intentional with our time.
My definition of ADHD is my brain seeing your head as a pineapple.
Yeah, tell me more.
Well, look at your head.
Oh, yeah. No, I gotcha. It's like you take something in your environment and it's like a tangent, right?
Yeah, you touched so many points. The superpower that I have, once you control ADHD, is I can almost remember, not by thinking, but it's just in there, everything that you said, and I can like deconstruct probably 75% of what you just mentioned there. So first we'll need a round two because there was so much in there. But let's start with one point before this podcast. And I think a lethally bad combination is ADHD with anxiety. I don't have anxiety, and I also, just like a blacksmith, I forge a sword with my ADHD. One tip that I would have for the audience is do very hard events that require your full concentration for quite a while. Ironmans, for example, just pummeling for 16 hours, 10-day Vipassana retreat, for example. And you can shape your brain in that way to take all that massive energy and focus into it. I think ADHD is energy. It's more mental capacity. I think that ADHD in our age, ADHD folks will perform better than normal people because there's all that stimuli. That is, if they can take it on and focus it into one funnel, that is. And right now, for example, I have a dog barking that's somewhat distracting me, but then I can move in and focus myself on one thing. I think it's practice also, like, for example, on my end lately, I've been having various work periods, right? So I told you about my 10 to 15 podcasts a day, but I also have the after supper period in which I have zero meeting. And then I look at my checklist and I start crunching the work solo by myself. But so many topics there. Maybe let's just end up with that because we'll do a round two. Focusmate is quite interesting. I'm gonna reuse it, but there's a potential chance that I'm not successful with it. There's a potential chance that I actually churn or just give up the habit for the very fact that I am ADHD. I'm like, oh, this is just not generating enough serotonin in my brain, and I'll just move on to my normal stuff. How do you actually fix that in your product?
Okay, we hit on so many things there. I will just go back to something that you hit on around like how you've hacked your ADHD, which I would describe as like you found structures that the structure itself helps you focus, right? So like an Iron Man is like you're so singularly focused on one thing and it requires so much energy. And in a way, it's like creating the optimal environment so that all of your capacity goes into one thing. And absolutely, I would say, to the extent that that environment creates safety also. If it doesn't create safety, you're still not going to be able to focus. But an Ironman, for example, or I forget some of the other examples you gave, but
Vipassana.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And the
super
blood flow
safe.
thing you mentioned was like so interesting, right? Because the other day I was interviewed by, I was actually interviewing Andrew Warner, and he started like dissing my business at minute 15, and the whole blood flow to my brain cut off. I exactly got into fight or flight, and that never happens to me. Um, anyway, I'm just like going for another tangent here, but yeah, go back to
Yeah,
the retreat
it's a
and
great example because you think, okay, a podcast is a structure for focus. Like there's a person right in front of me, and there's pressure, and there's all these things that are positive, unless you introduce danger, right? And then your body is like, fuck this, right? So Vipassana is another great example. And I would say Focusmate, and we don't need to get into a lot of the science of it, but it's a structure that allows you to focus, and it's another safe environment. So it'd be cool to hear what your experience is and kind of how it lines up against those other ones. But yeah, really cool kind of insight that you shared there. And then yeah, the serotonin and dopamine thing, those are it's like those are byproducts of when we create environments that do allow us to focus, right? We're going to get more serotonin, we're going to get more dopamine, and actually in some cases we're going to get more oxytocin as well, because we're with another person, we're experiencing a positive connection. A lot of people will say, because of Focusmate, I'm actually smiling and laughing a lot more, because every time I start a new session, I see a new person, there's this spark of connection. It might surprise you, but a lot of people come into these experience, into a Focusmate session, like, oh, I'm going to be friendly to this person. I'm meeting a new person, or I'm meeting a familiar partner. And so the kind of the biochemical cocktail is pretty powerful too. And
oxytocin.
as far as your last question about people churning, yeah, of course, procrastinators and all human beings have some kind of bar of habit formation. I would say, what works in our advantage is people get on Focusmate, and almost universally it's kind of a jaw-dropping experience of like, holy shit, that was a game changer. So that's basically the answer to your question, is the product works really fucking well. But yeah, we can't, we currently don't have the capacity to go knock on people's doors and say, hey, you forgot about this thing that was really helping you. So, one day.
Yeah, I love the product, dude. Really bullish on it. And I want to do a round two to talk about that and a couple of other topics that you mentioned. I want to talk about the serotonin chain, which I blogged about yesterday, which is basically Zuckerberg crunching 18-hour days in the early days and clutching to-dos, and jumping from serotonin to serotonin to serotonin. I think the greatest achievers in our current modern times, they've mastered the serotonin chain hits. I call it that way. There could be a better term for that. Taylor, where can people find out more about you and Focusmate until then?
Yep. So if you want to join Focusmate, we have a free plan, and we're at focusmate.com. And yeah, if you want to connect with me on social, LinkedIn and Instagram are the best place to do that. LinkedIn, Taylor Jacobson, and